Kuzuzamba, Bhutan e-learning project welcomes children to this lesson. I'm Kinzon Achu, and this is an English lesson for Key Stage 2, classes 4 to 6. Before I introduce today's lesson, let me ask you some question. Do you all read short stories? Or have you ever written a short story by yourself? Okay, I can hear some of you saying, yes, sir, I read a lot of short stories. I can hear some of our children saying, no, sir, I do not read short stories. Anyway, if you read a lot of short stories, you'll find some features that makes short story different from other genres such as poem and essay. So, in today's lesson, we will be learning the elements of short story. We are going to learn about the elements of a short story. Before I define what is short story, let us look at some lesson objectives. By the end of the lesson, each child will be able to identify 6 elements of short story, write a short story featuring all the 6 elements. Okay, class, are you all ready for the lesson? Yes. Ready to rock? Ready to roll. Today, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to learn about elements of short story. So, let me define what is a short story. So, short story is a form of writing about events and characters. A short story is a form of writing about events and characters. So it can be based on a true story, which are also known as non-fiction, and a make-up story with an imagined character. We call it fiction. And all these stories have the following elements. So for Key Stage 2, we're going to focus on the 6 elements of short story. First, we have the characters or character, setting, plot, point of view, conflict, and most importantly, the theme. So these are the 6 elements of short story. Okay, children, now let us look into the first element of short story. What is that? Yes. The first element we are going to look into is the character or characters. In some of the stories, there will be one character, whereas in other stories, we can see more than one characters. So, character is a person, animals, or things that take part in the story. So, character, we're going to look into 2 things: major character, minor character. So, this major character are the characters that have a big role to play in the story. And usually the major character will have a lot of dialogues. On the other hand, we have the minor characters. So minor characters usually support the major character. The second element of a short story is the setting. So setting basically means the time and the place where the story has taken place. In other words, we say setting tells when and where the story took place. Now, the setting can be anywhere. It can be at home, in the school, in the forest, in the town. It can be anywhere. And the time can be like in the morning, afternoon, evening, or sometimes in the setting it mentions the year, time, date, day, everything. So basically, setting refers to the time and place where the story has taken place. Are you all getting me? Yes. Please listen carefully. So these elements are very important part of a short story. Okay, children, the third element of a short story is the plot. Is the plot. So plot refers to the events that makes up the story. And usually the plot will have a clear beginning, middle, and an end. So let's look at the other element of a short story. Usually, all the short stories, even the movies, will have a conflict. So, conflict here refers to a problem in the story. Conflict means a problem. So, the problem that the main character experiences in the story is referred to as conflict. And we will look at the fourth element, that is the point of view. So point of view here refers to the person telling the story. So point of view is also known as the point of narration, which means it tells or it refers to the person who is telling the story. The stories can be told from three different points of view. First person point of view, second person point of view, and third person point of view. We can say that a story is told from the first person point of view if the character in the story is telling the story. And usually we can see the pronouns I, me, we used in the first person point of view stories. Which means that stories that are told from first person point of view will have the characters speaking. Secondly, you'll know that a story is narrated from a second person point of view when the writers has a narrator speaking to the reader, which means in this form of story usually told from second person point of view, you will see the words you, your, yours, which means the person a writer is having a narrator telling the story. So such stories are said to be narrated from second person point of view. The third person point of view has an external narrator telling the story, which means in such stories you will see the words, especially the pronouns he, she, it, or they. These pronouns are being used in this point of view. So these are the three different points of view in the short story. Let's look at the last element of a short story, that is the theme, the moral of the story. So a theme here refers to the main idea of the story. And in most of the stories, you won't see the theme written. You need to read the story again and again, and you need to infer the theme. You need to understand the theme. Okay, children? So far, we looked at the 6 elements of a short story: character, setting, plot, conflict, point of view, and the theme. So these 6 elements makes up a story. Now, let me tell you a story. Listen carefully. Once I finish telling the story, we are going to discuss the elements of short story based on the story that I narrated. So, the title of the story is The Honest Woodcutter. So, this is an interesting story. You will find this story in your school library, bookstores, and most interestingly, you can download this story from the internet. So, the title is The Honest Woodcutter. Once there lived a poor woodcutter. He used to cut trees in the woods. One day, towards afternoon, he was cutting wood on the bank of a river. His axe fell into the river, and the river was very deep. He could not take his axe out. He sat on the bank and started crying. Suddenly, the goddess of water appeared in front of him. She asked the reason why he was crying. The woodcutter told the whole story to the goddess. Then the goddess dived into the water and brought a golden axe. The woodcutter refused to take it. The woodcutter said, "No, this is not my axe." Again, the goddess dived and brought a silver axe. The woodcutter refused to accept it. He said, "No, this is not my axe." Then she brought an iron axe. This time, the woodcutter took it gladly. He was very happy to get back his axe. The goddess was much pleased with his honesty. She rewarded the woodcutter with the other 2 axes. The first axe made out of gold. The second axe made out of silver. Now he is having 3 axes. Let's connect this story with the elements of a short story. Who are the characters in this story? The honest woodcutter. Yes, you are right. The woodcutter is the character. We also have one more character. Can you guess that? Yes, it is the goddess of the water. The setting. Where and when did the story take place? The story took place at the bank of a river. When? In the afternoon. Plot. Plot is the events that makes up the story. So in this story, the honest woodcutter, a woodcutter was cutting a tree. Suddenly, his axe fell into the river. Then he cried. The goddess of water appeared and asked him, "Why are you crying?" After telling the whole story, the goddess of water brought him a golden axe, then a silver axe, and finally an iron axe that actually belongs to the poor woodcutter. So, the poor woodcutter did not accept the golden axe. He did not accept the silver axe. But he was happy to get back his iron axe. Because of this, the goddess of water was very pleased and gave him two other axes, the golden axe and the silver axe. Now, what was the conflict? What was the problem in this story? The woodcutter's axe fell into the river. That was the problem. And this problem makes up the story. Point of view. So I said, point of view refers to the person who is telling the story. So here we can see pronoun he, she, it. Therefore, the story is being told from third person point of view. So, what lesson did you learn from this story? What is the theme of this story? The poor woodcutter was honest. Therefore, you can say honesty is the best quality. So, these are some of the elements of short story. Okay, children, now we discussed the elements of short story. I even told you a story. So, based on this story, we have discussed what are the elements of short story. Now, you have a home task. Read a story from your textbook and complete the story map given below. So I have used a mind mapping. In this center, you are going to write the title of the story and the author, name of the person who has written the story. Now, from there, you are going to write the characters. Who are the characters? Setting, where and when did the story take place? Conflict, what was the problem in the story? Point of view, who narrated the story? Plot, what are some of the events that made up the story? And lastly, what is the main idea that you got from the story? Second question is, write a short story featuring all the 6 elements. Are you all clear with the questions? Okay. Now, before I close today's lesson, let us discuss what we have. Let us look at what we have discussed in today's lesson. First, we defined short story. We looked at 6 elements of short story for Key Stage 2. What are they? Character, setting, plot, conflict, point of view, and the theme. Okay, children, before we close our lesson, I would like to give you a thought for the day by George R.R. Martin. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only once. So with this, I urge all our students to read books. Don't waste your time, and happy learning. Thank you all the students for attending the lesson. Kadinche.